Welcome. I'm Mylan Dinnerstein, counsel to Governor Cuomo, and I'm very happy and grateful to be here today. Today, you'll be hearing from New York State Police Superintendent, my colleague, Joseph D'Amico, John Corlett, the Legislative Committee Chairman for AAA New York, Ben Lieberman, and finally, from our governor, Governor Cuomo. Since Governor Cuomo has taken office, he has made safety of New Yorkers a top priority, including on our highway and roads. In 2011, Governor Cuomo signed a new law that strengthened the enforcement of texting while driving violations. It made using handheld electronic devices while driving and texting while driving a primary traffic offense, which basically means that law enforcement, like the state police, can stop a driver and give them a ticket for texting while driving. That same year, Governor Cuomo also directed the Department of Motor Vehicles to raise the penalty for using handheld devices while driving from 2 to 3 points. These efforts were important to keep our roads safe. But texting while driving remains a national and truly a statewide epidemic, especially among our younger generation of drivers. Of 15,000 New York State drivers surveyed, 49% said they sent or viewed texts while driving. And you'll see we have this lovely chart of a football field here on the side. And the reasons that's there is because every time you text, your eyes are off the road for 4 seconds. And if you are driving at 55 miles per hour, that is the length of a football field. So I think that tries to show you what a problem this is when people's eyes aren't where they should be, which is, of course, on the road, to protect all of us. So today, Governor Cuomo is going to direct the Department of Motor Vehicles to increase the number of points on a person's driving record upon conviction for texting while driving from the current 3 points to 5 points. This is for all drivers and will be effective tomorrow. This is consistent with reckless driving. Second, Governor Cuomo will propose legislation that would establish tough new penalties for young and new drivers convicted of texting while driving. As we know, our young people, electronics is a huge part of their lives, and you really can't separate them, but we have to when it comes to driving. Under current law, probationary and junior license are suspended for 60 days for violations such as speeding and, again, reckless driving. Now, we are proposing to enact a law that would make that the same if you were texting while driving. You would get suspended for 60 days if you were a probationary or junior driver. Second, if there was another violation within 6 months of your license being suspended, you would be additionally, again, subject to an additional suspension for 6 months if you're a new driver, which is called a probationary driver, which actually applies to any age, or if you're a junior driver, which is basically under 18, our newest drivers, for another 60 days. These changes are important, and we are going to encourage the legislature to speedily enact them. The governor is proposing this legislation to ensure that texting while driving gets the same severity of punishment that this dangerous habit deserves. Technology continues to play such an important role in our lives, and Governor Cuomo is ensuring that our public safety laws keep up with the technology. These are really important changes, and we believe they will help keep all of us in the state of New York safer. Thank you, and now I'm pleased to introduce my colleague, Superintendent Joseph D'Amico of the New York State Police.
Thank you, Mylan, and good morning. I thank all of you for joining us today. Over the last 29 months, Governor Cuomo has led the state's effort to make our roadways and our highways safer for New Yorkers. As Mylon mentioned, over the last 2 years, New York has strengthened the laws to make texting while driving a more serious offense, so as to prevent drivers from doing it and to better protect all those traveling on our roadways. Under the law that Governor Cuomo signed in 2011, if we see you texting or using your cell phone while you're driving, we could pull you over for that offense alone. The law has already produced results. In 2012, law enforcement issued over 30,000 tickets for texting while driving, compared to about 9,000 in the prior year and only about 183 back in 2009. That's a tremendous increase in enforcement in just 4 years. Recently, during Operation Hang Up, which is a week-long enforcement detail to crack down on distracted drivers, troopers wrote more than 3,000 tickets for people texting and talking on their phones while behind the wheel. Just last month alone, almost 1,000 people were ticketed for texting while driving. Stronger penalties for those who are caught texting while driving sends a strong and fair message that this won't be tolerated in New York State. Our troopers see every day firsthand what can happen when people text or become distracted behind the wheel. We also recognize that texting while driving is even much more prevalent among our young and inexperienced drivers. It's a widespread and growing problem. It's become just as dangerous as speeding and reckless driving. One of our main responsibilities as state police is to ensure the safety of the millions of drivers and passengers who use our roadways each and every day. Over the summer months, at the governor's direction, you could expect to see troopers out there doing increased enforcement, doing more checkpoints to catch those people who are texting and using their cell phone while driving. In 2011, the new distracted driving law gave us the tools that we need to stop distracted driving and to prevent accidents and injuries. With the actions that he's taking today, Governor Cuomo is continuing to help law enforcement by improving the tools that we need to do our jobs better and to keep our roads safe. Thank you, Governor, for your work in this area and for your partnership with law enforcement. I'm now pleased to introduce John Corlett from AAA New York.
Thank you, Superintendent D'Amico, and on behalf of AAA, I'd like to thank Governor Cuomo for all the work he's done in the past 2 years to make New York's roads safer. He's been a true champion on this issue. About 6 months after he took office, New York strengthened the law. We went from a secondary enforcement to a primary enforcement. In the state budget, just passed in April, the fine levels were increased. I believe that takes effect in July. So he's been a true champion of this issue, which is, as you can see from the charts on the side there, this is a growing issue in the public health and safety, traffic safety community. The reality, though, is that this texting and using cell phones remains a serious and dangerous and common problem on the roads. In fact, driving here today, I saw people right out front texting on 34th Street here. So this is an important and necessary step. 5 points on your driver's license is a serious hit. I think that sends a serious message that we're going to crack down on this selfish behavior, which places other drivers at risk. And I would encourage the legislature, there's about 3 weeks of the session left, the session ends June 20th, to take action on the governor's plan. So on behalf of AAA, I again would like to encourage the New York State Legislature to get behind this common sense proposal. And I would now like to introduce someone who has firsthand experience of the terrible consequences of distracted driving and has become a strong advocate, Ben Lieberman.
Thank you, John, and thank you, Governor, for inviting me to speak today. My name is Ben Lieberman. I'm from Chappaqua. 2 summers ago, I received a phone call that changed my family forever. It was around 10 a.m., and I was told my son, Evan, was in a car crash and being medevaced to Westchester Medical Center. It was a regular summer morning. Evan was home after his first year of college. He was heading to his summer job in Woodbury near the Bear Mountain Bridge. That was just 40 minutes from our house, and he was carpooling with 3 college buddies, college friends. He was sitting in the back seat and he had a seatbelt on. By 7 p.m. after his 3rd operation of the day, doctors had told us he had a 10% chance to live through the night. The seatbelt saved his life, but the force and inertia caused critical internal damage. Evan made it through that night and 31 other nights. Being a healthy 19-year-old has its advantages in a situation like this. However, Evan had to endure 15 operations and an incredible amount of blood transfusion. The human body holds 5 liters of blood. Evan needed a staggering 95 liters of transfusions. That's like really refilling your body 19 times in 32 days. He was always stubborn, and it served him well. He was a fighter. But for a month, our family lived in that hospital. Evan's condition was up and down and sometimes very hopeful. But on the 32nd day, right in front of our eyes, we lost him. The driver of the car told authorities he fell asleep at the wheel. The day after the crash, he apologized to the boys through Facebook and said he was exhausted and taking those 1-second naps at the wheel. But also, he testified he went to sleep at 11 p.m. and had plenty of sleep that night before. Things didn't make sense to me, and I needed to learn more. Through much effort, we brought our case through an administrative judge who ruled the driver violated several traffic laws, including, and most notably, using his cell phone while driving. His license was suspended for a year. That verdict was only a few months ago. Today, cars are being built safer and issues like drunk driving are down, but the use of smartphone continues, and it increases, and it's increasing along with fatal collisions. We need to connect the dots and pay more attention to these deadly trends. Since we lost Evan, our family has had good days and bad days, but we try to concentrate on the good. But it's hard to not feel that loss every single minute of the day. Happy days like Evan's birthday, Father's Day, Mother's Day, those days are especially hard. In memory of Evan, we started a foundation called Evan's Team, and along with that, an organization called DORCS, and that stands for Distracted Operators Risk Casualties. We want to keep the dorks off the road. Our idea is to do for texting what Mothers Against Drunk Driving did for drinking. We want to advocate for better protocol in investigating the abuses of smartphone driving, as well as legislation and penalties that will deter this destructive behavior. It's scary how a younger generation is so addicted to their cell phones. Teenage drivers throughout generations have proven to be inexperienced behind the wheel and fearless. That's how it was in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and so on. The biggest difference is, in those days, drivers weren't addicted to smartphones. Now, on top of inexperienced and fearless, add every beep and chime that is pulling eyesight off the road. This is a very dangerous combination. That's why what the governor is doing today is so important. His legislation will send a powerful message to young drivers that nothing on your cell phone can be urgent enough or worth risking lives for. I hope that my family's story will show New Yorkers how critical Governor's proposal is for safety in our communities. Drivers need to worry about the lives that are in their hands and not the cell phone that are in their hands. The Governor's actions will help ensure that drivers of all ages will carry out that responsibility. Thank you for this opportunity to speak and to use this platform. We're grateful to be part of an important step in combating this epidemic. Now it's my honor to introduce the Governor of the State of New York, Andrew Cuomo.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everyone, to Mylan Dennerstein, Superintendent Joseph D'Amico, to John Corlett, AAA. Thank you very much for being here. To Mr. Lieberman, thank you very much for being here, and your family. His wife Debbie is here, and his daughters Jamie and Raquel. Thank you very much for being here, and thank you for sharing your story. As a father, I can imagine how painful it is to retell the story and to go through it again. But thank you, and thank your family for taking a really terrible, tragic incident and putting the energy into a positive place, and for having the empathy to try to help others through your tragedy. And I think your being here today and getting the message out is going to be very important. As you've heard, the issue of texting while driving is a chronic problem in society, and it unfortunately is getting worse. The good news is people will hear the message of the Lieberman family. They'll hear the message from today. And the good news is that people can learn and society can learn. There's an evolutionary curve to this. I'm old enough to remember when no one wore a seatbelt at one time. Cars had seatbelts and people just didn't wear the seatbelt. 1984, New York passed a law that required people to wear a seatbelt. Governor at that time was a fellow named Mario Cuomo. My father passed the law. And I remember people felt it was such an intrusion that you would tell them to wear a seatbelt. Today, 30 years later, it's commonplace. People wear a seatbelt. Your son was wearing a seatbelt in the back seat, which is evidence of that sort of extraordinary compliance. So society learned, and society now wears seatbelts, and we take it for granted. In many ways, the same thing with drinking and driving. We haven't made the same progress we've made with seatbelts, but we've made progress. The amount of drinking and driving was way up, and it has gotten better over time. Bad news is we're going to have to go through that experience with texting while driving, and we're at the very beginning of it, and the numbers are not good, and the numbers actually show that we're going the other way. Between 2005 and 2011, there's been a 143% increase in cell phone-related crashes. 143% increase. Just to show the juxtaposition, during the same period of time, there was an 18% reduction in crashes related to alcohol. It's the chart on my right. It shows the number of crashes from cell phones going up, number of alcohol-related crashes going down. 2011, 25,000 people injured in crashes with distracted driving compared to 4,600 in crashes that were alcohol-related. Again, distracted driving, much more of a problem on the numbers than alcohol and driving as a combination. When you ask, well, how did we make these changes? How did we learn? How did we grow? It's always been a combination of education and enforcement. That's the combination. Education, getting the message out, learning from the unfortunate circumstances and tragedies that people have gone through, and increased enforcement and penalties. Seatbelt, we changed the law and we made it the law that you needed to wear the seatbelt. Alcohol-related driving, we've been reducing the amount of alcohol that one is allowed to consume and still drive. And as you've heard, we've been steadily increasing the law and the penalty and the sanctions on distracted driving, and we're going to do that once again. Currently, the law is 3 points for a ticket on distracted driving. We're going to increase the 3 points to 5 points. 5 points is a serious offense. 11 points over 18 months, and your license is suspended. The more points you have, the higher your insurance cost, and the harder it is to get insurance. So raising the number of points to 5 points is a significant increase. On top of that, this is a particular problem for young drivers. And Mr. Lieberman was exactly right. Young drivers are at risk to begin with because they are inexperienced. And the lack of experience puts you at risk. Mr. Lieberman's point is exactly right. The unfortunate combination is the inexperience and the fearlessness. When you're young, you literally don't know what you don't know, and you don't know the risk that you're taking. And with youth brings sometimes confidence that is misplaced, and it's often misplaced when you are an inexperienced driver. Driving is one of those functions that experience matters, and you just don't have the experience when you're a young driver. The inexperience plus fearlessness is a problem, but when you put texting and the use of cell phone with it, it is really a dangerous combination. And for young people now, that cell phone, that smartphone, that iPod is such a part of life. Their thumbs are constantly moving. They have it in their hand at all times. The whole rhythm is that you have to respond within 11 seconds, otherwise the world is going to pass you by. That is a new challenge and a new behavior pattern. When you put that together behind the wheel with the experience and the fearlessness, it really is a dangerous combination. And as we've learned too many times, sometimes you only get one mistake. Sometimes you don't get a second chance. And sometimes the lesson you learned is a fatal lesson to learn. And that's why focusing on young people in this regard is exactly right. And we're going to have additional penalties for young drivers who are during their probationary period or when they have a junior license. If you're ticketed for distracted driving, there's going to be an additional suspension depending on if it's in a probationary period or if you have a junior license. Because we want the message to be very clear to young drivers: don't do it and don't think about doing it. And if they are doing it, we want to catch them when they're young doing it, and it's going to have a serious consequence, so maybe they learn if they're lucky enough to get a second chance. Because remember, sometimes you're not lucky enough to get a second chance when it comes to this error. We're going to couple the increased penalties with increased enforcement, and that's what you heard from Superintendent Joseph D'Amico. This is now a private primary offense. You can be ticketed just for doing this. It doesn't have to be distracted driving plus speeding or plus anything else. You can be ticketed just for distracted driving. The state police will have increased enforcement measures starting this weekend with the increased points on your license starting tomorrow. So we are serious about this. And again, society has gone through it, but it only works when you have the education effort together with the enforcement effort. And we're going to be doing everything we can. When you look at the numbers and you look at the loss of life, it is staggering information. We want to be doing everything we can to make sure we reverse the current trends and we reduce the loss of life. With that, I would ask Mr. Lieberman, Superintendent Milan, and Mr. Corlett to join me on stage. Any questions you might have would be our pleasure to answer for myself or any of our guests. Thank you. We raised the fines several months ago during the state budget process in April. So the fines went up in April. Just the number of points are going up starting tomorrow. Number of points for all drivers, increased penalties for probationary drivers or drivers, young drivers with junior licenses, increased enforcement starting tomorrow. The number of points is done by administration, so that becomes effective tomorrow. The increased penalty for the probationary license and junior license is a legislative proposal. That needs a legislative approval before it becomes effective. That's a law. But the number of points goes up tomorrow. The enforcement starts tomorrow. I'm sorry? You know, with the... You never know, as you know, you never know with the legislature in Albany. I would expect not. I think this is a common sense change, especially for the probationary drivers and the junior license, because this is a problem across the board. Let's not. We are all in some ways addicted, but it's especially prevalent for young drivers. And as we said, it's a bad combination. The inexperience plus the distraction can be a deadly combination, and that's what we want to stop. Both. Both. It's texting or talking. It doesn't matter. It's the unauthorized use of the device. It's in motion. It's the operation of the vehicle. Do you know if it's while you're stopped? It's not when the vehicle is stopped. It's when the vehicle is in operation. Every day. Every day. I spend a lot of time in a car driving. It's a big state, and so I do a lot of driving. It's amazing how chronic and how prevalent the activity is. And, you know, I think it's relatively harmless, you know, apparently. Well, I'm just a quick message. I'm just going to take a quick look. The whole orientation of the device is that it's momentary. But it only takes a moment. And that's what that chart is speaking to. You know, a vehicle that's going 60 miles an hour, you cover a long distance in a moment. And it's not really a moment, you know. It's a couple of clicks. You look at one thing, you look at another thing. So it's apparently harmless and quick, but it can be deadly. But I see it every day, literally every day. Yes, we will. And we're working with corporate partners on a public education campaign that will be going along with this. Any other questions on topic? Yes and yes. The increased enforcement will be done by the state police all across the state. I would encourage local police to do the same. Okay, Zach? You know, Zach, the first part of your question was right. The governor runs the executive branch. There's a legislative branch. There's a judicial branch, and each one is responsible for itself. It would be inappropriate, and I would have no interest in meddling in their business. What I have said to the legislature was, look, I think the best antidote for all of this, for the negative publicity that some members of the legislature have had over the past few weeks, do your job and do it extraordinarily well. Pass bills, make this state a better state, do the people's business. We have 3 or 4 weeks left in the legislative session. They should be able to turn around at the end of the legislative session and say, we had a great session. We got a lot of good things done. And by the way, we did it despite everything else and all the distractions that were happening. And I hope that's what they do. And I think that's what they should do. Well, I think, look, when you, many of the issues that you deal with are controversial. By definition, many of the important issues are controversial. That's why they're controversial, right? And that's why they haven't been dealt with, because of the controversy. And in many ways, I believe those are probably often the most important issues to deal with, because they tend to be the ones that the political process shies away from. The issue of gun control is one of those very controversial issues. We passed a law in the state of New York that I'm very proud of, the SAFE Act, that I believe is one of the best gun control laws in the nation. And I understand full well the feeling on both ends of the spectrum. I understand the controversy, and I understand the anger from some of those people. And some of those people make threats. But you can't allow the process to be governed by the threats, right? So you do your job and you go forward. It's part of the process. It seems we have a higher frequency in the recent past of more polarization and more extremes. But personally, my credo is you do what you're elected to do, you do the right thing, and just don't succumb to the threats. And you're right, it's part of the process. We get threats all the time. You know, it's part of the process. Gun issue, certainly, there were a lot of people who are annoyed about the gun issue, but it can be the marriage equality issue. It can be the issue of choice, a woman's right to choose, the abortion issue. These are very controversial issues. People feel very strongly about it. Some people threaten about it, but, you know, you're there to do the right thing. No. Not that I know of. You know, I'm sure that the person who is elected mayor of the city of New York will act in the best interest of the people of the city and will negotiate contracts that are in the best interest of the city. The city has certainly fiscal hardships, and that has to be the governing philosophy when you sit down to negotiate. The city doesn't have a lot of money for a contract. That's going to be the economic reality. You know, we'll see what the budget poses, but I believe if the process works and democracy works, you're going to elect a person who's going to operate in the best interest of the city. That was the Liebermans are from Chappaqua, and we were just discussing this backstage. Technically, the Newcastle Memorial Day Parade is a parade that the Clintons often march in. Last year, former President Bill Clinton marched in it also, and it's a parade that I often march in. Say that again, please. I'm sorry, Zach. Yeah, the mayoral election has a long way to go, and I understand what the polls say. You know, it's going to be a long campaign. Let's see what happens. I'm sure there'll be a lot of twists and turns. There normally are. This seems like a more interesting race than usual, and they are difficult times, so you could argue it's a more important race than usual. So let's see how it goes, but I don't intend to comment on the twists and turns of the New York City mayoral election. But I appreciate that you continue to ask questions that you know that I don't want to answer. And I respect your perseverance, and I hope that you respect my discipline. You know, I do. I have 3 young ladies at home. I have 2 young drivers, 2 18-year-olds. Who just are home for the summer now, and they're going to be doing more driving, and it'll be their first summer of driving. And I was thinking about them when I was making the comments that I was just making. This is a frightening combination. The inexperience is real. I don't care how smart you are, and my 2 daughters are brilliant, they really are. I don't care how smart you are. And I don't care how much you've studied for the driving test and how well you did on the driving test. When it comes to driving, there is something to experience. And you don't understand it and you don't have the intuition until you've gone through it. There's something about feeling a car slide when it's raining or when it's snowing. There's something about having that first sudden almost crash that gives you that sick feeling in your stomach, you know, and you literally have to experience it. And until you experience it, you don't know it, and you will be a better driver for the function of experience. And when you put that together with the confidence of youth and the sense that they're they're immortal, and they're indomitable. It's a frightening combination. And then these personal electronic devices, the cell phones, the smartphones, this is just new, right? We haven't gone through this before. And it is such an ingrained part of who they are. It's almost an appendage. It's almost glued to their hand sometimes, you know. It's a frightening combination. And I may sound like an old, fuddy-duddy with a lot of annoying advice, or an overprotective father, or just a rigid personality, or however they want to dismiss me. But it also happens to be true. And I remember my parents saying, there's an advantage to age and having survived because you get a little wisdom. And this is one of those situations where wisdom counts and wisdom works, and their age, by definition, is the liability, and the lack of experience is the liability. So trust me, listen to me as a parent. If that doesn't work, we're going to change the law, and we're going to increase the penalties. So if you're foolish enough to disregard your parents, then there's going to be a legal sanction. And if you're a young driver and you're doing it during that probationary period with a junior license, you're going to lose your license. And maybe that'll teach you the lesson. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lieberman. Thank you.